learned.
Don't be afraid to ask for feedback is a great segue into what I think is one of the most important components of your portfolio, and that is your artist statement, which is oftentimes the most difficult thing to do for an artist. So the first thing I want to say about the artist statement is you don't necessarily have to write it. If you have someone else you trust who you think understands your work and is a good writer and can write it for you, I don't see any problem doing that. I think sometimes artists are too close to the work to actually write about it in a comprehensive, even slightly objective way. So don't feel like you have to do it. If you have a person you think could take a stab at it, try it. If you do choose to write it yourself, make sure that a lot of people read it before you put it on your website or send it to a gallery, send it to a curator, any of those things. Don't just have your husband or your wife or your mother or sister read it. Have your toughest critic read it, because a lot of people will turn to it. It's intro to your work 101. It will be the only information they get about your work other than the visual. So it's really important that it be clear and concise and accurately represent you. So I can't stress that enough, the importance of having several people read it and making sure that it makes sense to you, that you're happy with it, and that it makes sense to a person who's never met you or never seen your work.
No art speak. It's the most annoying
no
thing.
No contemporary art speak.
To gallerists, unless there's a review written about you that you quote, somewhere in your site, it shouldn't be in the third person either. Even if someone else writes it for you, it's got to be you speaking. Mm-hmm. There's nothing more annoying than, the Victorian we or third person statements. He wanted to be an artist since he was 1.5 years old. It's like, oh my God.
Right. And focus on the work. Right. Unless
exactly.
Your biography is germane to your work, really focus on what the work is about. And you can include, at the end, I would never lead with these details. You can put them at the end, where you went to school, when you graduated, any awards, things like that. Don't lead with them, because people want to, if they're reading it, it's because they want to know about your work. They've already, yes.
We asked if everyone kind of considered themselves emerging artists, and a lot of people raised their hands. And so, the problem that I have with, I don't know if it's a problem, but with my artist statement is that a lot of times I feel like my work is in flux, like it's a new thing, and so I don't feel comfortable making definitive statements about this is what my work is. And I guess I just wonder if you have any suggestions for that time period where it's a new body of work and possibly doesn't, the old artist statement doesn't apply anymore, so you don't want to.
Mm-hmm. I guess then that's a really good question. And two things I would advise you to do is, if someone else has written about your work and you're happy with what they've said, you can pull from that, like Susan said. And the second thing is you're the same person, you're the same artist, so there's something that's linking these bodies of work, and you're just going to have to spend a lot of time with yourself to figure out what those essential things are that you can talk about. If your work changes all the time, that's okay. But there's some essential quality that you can pull out and build on.
That's right, and you have, there's an artist statement about who you are, what drives you, what inspires you, why you create what you create, but there's also, the opportunity for small, all brief statements about each body of work. I'm a photographer, it's all photography, but each group or project of my work has its own statement. There's a reason that I made that work. So there's a small statement about each of them on my website. Just don't get really wordy, because you don't need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would recommend keeping it to 100 words, really. Not very long. You'll lose people's interest. Unfortunately, we live in an age where there's so much information available to people all the time. That if your statement is too lengthy or it's too difficult to access the images on your website or anything, people could too easily give up. So make it easy for them.
Oh, that's something we didn't bring up with websites, but please make sure they download quickly, because there's nothing more frustrating to a gallerist than waiting and waiting and waiting, and the thing is going downloading, downloading, down. It's really annoying, and I remember, when I'd get web submissions, I would eventually, if they didn't come up soon, just say, forget it, I'm not going to spend my day doing this. People don't realize how much money, time, and effort galleries put in, not only to the artists they represent, but to the artists that are potentially being looked at for representation. And, you need to be respectful of their time.
Which is, again, another great segue. Put your best work forward, because you have to assume that you only get them for a couple of minutes on the web. So while your website should be comprehensive, and even if you're, you started making paintings and now you're making sculptures and now you've moved on to ceramics or whatever, all of those things should be present, but the emphasis should always be on what you are making now, what you're working on now. Great photographs are so important. And it's just a personal preference. I don't like to see works installed. I don't like to see frames. I just want to see the work.
Great.
So if you're a painter, just an image of the work, crop it down right to the edge, and make sure that they're just fantastic photographs. And again, we talked about captions, details, providing information about size, title, when you made it. And Tom, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm going to say it, and if it's a lie, correct me. But I think if you, like with a caption, like this one here, if you say Joe Smith, title, having that on your website multiple times as a caption for the image would probably work well with your SEO.
Absolutely. For your, you mean using your name? Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So if you want those images to be correlated with your name within the search engines, put it within the caption, or like I said before, there's something called an image alt tag, which is in the HTML sort of behind the scenes, but that's how Google is able to put words with images.
Right. So even though someone's on your website and presumably they know all of these works are created by you, it won't hurt. It's not going to be annoying, and it'll help your Google response to have your name on the page multiple times.
One of the things that, for me, when I closed the gallery, that I had learned over the 9 years, really is how to build a good website. So my own website, when I had it done, I took all of those things, and I have a slideshow at the beginning, and it's an overview of me. It's an overview of the bodies of work, and it's really interesting because they're very different, but you get a slideshow, and then, you can go to the different projects. Take the pieces that are the best. Maybe they're all sold, whatever, but what you're really proud of, put them up the front. In my case, my assistant chose them, and I trusted her to choose them, but you can, that's putting your best work forward, as you said. You want to have things to intrigue people and keep them on your site. You want to get them there, but then you want to keep them there for a while, so that it is more than 2 minutes of looking.
Right, and an important thing to keep in mind is that your favorite work might not be the crowd pleaser. So if everyone you've ever met loves a certain work and it's not your favorite, put it on there.
Put it up there.
Put it on there,
Exactly.
because there's some reason everyone else likes it.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Good call.
you have to battle your own demons, and sometimes if it's not your favorite work, put it up anyway. Okay, so that's artist statement. Putting your best work forward, and the next thing to talk about is sort of the actual portfolio and walking into a gallery, if any of you plan to do that rather than email a link. And Susan and I will both touch on that, but again, gallerists are very, very busy people. People think that you're sitting there babysitting art all day. You're not. You're very busy. You're working just like everyone else. So don't show up unannounced. Never just show up with your work and say, I'm an artist and I want to talk to you, because that will get you on a blacklist.
Oh, absolutely. And it will get you on a blacklist with all the galleries, because we all talk. And there are associations like Chicago Art Dealers Association, and everybody brings those things up. There was a guy who submitted 6 portfolios when I was on Peoria, 6 identical portfolios, brought them in, waited for someone to open the locked door early in the morning, set them by our mailboxes. It was like the joke among all the galleries for like 3 months. none of the galleries in my building of 6 of us had any remotely the same work, which was very funny. And this person didn't fit in any of our galleries. He had never done any homework. He had never looked. And he just decided, "Oh, I'll just submit to everyone." You know, one gallery per city at a time, I would say.
Do your homework. Find the best fit for you. That means, showing with artists who you feel, again, essential, you have essential qualities in common with. Galleries who are showing artists in your age, in your medium, in your price range, things like that. Make sure that when you make that concerted effort, you make that first overture, that it's a really well thought out one. I think the one gallery per city is a really great rule.
It's a good way to do it. You can send out 10 portfolios to 10 cities at the same time and wait to hear from them, but only one in each city. And most artists who are well along in their career do have galleries who represent them in several cities. So that's a good way to do it. I think when you look at them, if they have something that's just like your work, it's particularly for photographers, it's very easy to have work that's so much like someone else's. And obviously that's not a good fit because they already have that person doing what you're doing. But think about yourself in a group show with the people who they represent, because that's probably the first way you'll be shown by any gallery that represents you or just shows you.
I think that's an excellent exercise and is a great exercise for an artist just thinking about their own work. Make your dream list of people you want to show with. It doesn't have to be realistic, but it's a great way to get yourself a little bit outside of your work and think about your work in a bigger context.
Do you recommend showing in a series or showing a variety to a gallery?
I recommend showing a variety, absolutely. Different series. Because if they're looking at you as an artist, they're looking at you, over the long horizon. They're not looking at you for one body of work.
Exactly, but I wouldn't show only one from each series, because if you do that, then we don't know, we as gallerists wouldn't know if you would be able to handle a solo show. We don't know if, unless we go to your site and we see that there are substantial pieces. I always liked seeing, like, on a CD entry, 3 of each body of work, 3 pieces from each body of work. That was what we asked for.
And maybe, stick to the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
You want to have that archival material available on your website, things that you created 10, 15, 20 years ago. But in terms of what's at the forefront and what you're talking to people about, keep it fairly recent.
You guys mentioned, approaching one portfolio per city, so, hitting up other cities. If, let's say it's Columbus, Ohio, for whatever reason, you can't just become a presence in that gallery very easily to become familiar, so you do your research online. But to submit that work to them, how, your portfolio, how do you not just get tossed aside because they don't know who you are, but you've done your research and your study of them as best as you can based on their web presence? How do you get through that?
Exactly. Your cover letter will help. First of all, don't feel that only Chicago galleries want to show Chicago artists. Santa Fe shows Chicago artists, San Francisco, New York, all show Chicago. You don't have to start at, Pace Wildenstein. You can start, with, everybody, you know what, it's really exciting to have had a show in LA or New York. So go to a smaller, a newer, younger gallery and try to get shown there, as opposed to, the point for your CV is to have many shows on there. And it doesn't have to be your dream gallery where you would love to be represented. Yeah.
I guess
Sure.
my question was how, with all their other cold call, more or less, submissions that they're getting, even if you call and get their permission to say, hey, yeah, that's fine, send us,
Right.
how do you get at least them to open up your portfolio? Is it going to be a solid cover letter?
The cover letter is going to help you.
Yeah.
So a solid cover letter is going to
If
be...
it's Columbus, I think you have to go, you have to visit the gallery, you have to know who else they represent. You'll be surprised to know that you'll be in the minority if you do your homework. If you do your homework and you say, here's what I think I have in common with some of the artists you represent. Here's why I'm a good fit. Here's what I'm doing.
Right.
Here's the small successes I've had so far. These sorts of things. that will be impressive because a lot of galleries just get blind submissions. They
Yeah,
don't get
like the-
well thought out
like the
submissions.
six, like the six
Right.
to all the galleries. You know, the thing is, you know, if you want to look for a match, you definitely want to visit the galleries. So if you travel, you go on a vacation or something, go to the galleries, see what's there. Wow, I think my work could fit here, and that's a way to do it. But again, back it out all the way to the time you're doing the research. You know, first of all, find out if they accept submissions. Usually it'll be on the site. If it doesn't say something, then you're cool to call the gallery, and I would ask for the assistant, not the director, and ask them, are you accepting portfolios? Assistant directors often have aspirations of becoming the director, and they would love nothing more than to bring in a great artist that has a show and sells out, because that, you know, with the owner of the gallery, that's going to really bode well for them. They like to discover something, whereas directors may be too busy to really want to discover something. In Flatfile, I got 20 to 30 portfolios a week, a week, sorry. Every week I got 20 to 30 portfolios. First, let the interns take a look at them just to see if there was anything, you know, for example, when I was only photography, if they sent me paintings, obviously it's not going to fit. Just to see if it was our aesthetic. And I would guess that most galleries probably have like a previewing level like that, where they kind of look at the things that come in. First, you just want to make sure if they even want to see work, because if you send it, then it may not get opened. But my guess is if you're a Chicago artist and you're talking to Columbus, you know, Chicago's higher on the rung than Columbus is. In that way, they'd be interested in looking at a Chicago artist. So, cover letter? Have you had another?
Second question about, okay, would it be better to send, you've got your cover letter, you're sending images, would you be also referencing your website? Would you want to send them a disc? And if the disc you are, should it be Mac or PC? I mean,
Well,
that's...
we're not there yet. We're gonna get there. That's the physical thing. We're still working on the parts of it that you need to have, and we'll get to that. I think, you know, the actual work. Yeah.
How do you know whether a gallery out of town is reputable or not? Because I've heard horror stories of galleries selling things out from under artists and never telling them.
Yeah, I've heard about that
You can't really
too.
check on them.
It's tough, but you know, you can actually look at things like Yelp. I mean, those can actually be tools for you, and people do post on there when they've had bad experiences. When I had artists that I represented who also were represented in other cities, and they'd have a situation, it didn't happen too often, but I did have 3 or 4 times when they'd say they, you know, sold the work 2 years ago and never paid me. You know, what do? I said, go on Yelp. Put it out there. Let people know that this person is doing this. It's the fastest way to make those things stop. In terms of getting paid, you know, you can also threaten that before you do it, and sometimes the check will arrive very quickly. Sometimes a letter from an attorney on legal letterhead will do it. If you have a friend or, you know, family friend or family member who can write you that letter, that'll often get you paid if it's a situation like that. But it's, you know, it's all hearsay. But that's one reason we're saying visit the galleries. You know, visit them, go to their openings, you know, see what they're showing, see how they greet you. There's a gallery in New York that one of my artists was represented by, and I was in New York, and I went and I thought, you know, I'm very friendly, and I was going to go and say hi, and she was so daunting and so nasty that I didn't even introduce myself. I just left. So, you know, there are those kinds of things, and if you're there, you'll see that.
Yeah, you know, your relationship with your gallerist is a really important one. So treat it like you would any other important relationship. You know, you have to trust the person. You have to want to talk to the person, things like that.
Yeah, it's very
So
much
if you-
like a marriage, actually.
It is.
So cover letter. Let's talk about the first thing on that cover letter. Obviously, it should look like a nice business letter, but whether it's email or a hard letter, depending on if the gallery wants a disc submission or if they're happy to go to your website, when you introduce yourself, please never, never say, "To whom it may concern," or "Dear Gallery Director." Oh my God, do your homework. And, you know, I actually would get those and send back, "Dear Artist." We don't take submissions from someone who doesn't even know who we are, because if you don't know that, you know, if no one tells you, you won't learn it. But it's so disrespectful. You know, I'm going to spend a half an hour with your portfolio if I like the work when I first see it, and, you know, you owe me the the respect of saying, dear Susan Orinko, or, if it's my assistant, it's all on the web. It's all on every website. You can find out who works there. If you can't find it on the web, call up and ask, what's the name of the assistant director? And dear, Tom Jones. It's really, really important. That salutation is probably the most important part of the whole thing, because it shows respect. After that, just tell briefly, if you've been in the gallery, it's a great way to start. I was in your gallery in October, and I saw a fabulous show by, Jane Smith. After seeing that show, I thought that my work would really fit. Or I was on your website, and I saw a similarity between the work you're showing and my work, and so I'm submitting. And it's all it has 2 sentences. That's about it. If you're going to be in that city at some point, you can say, I will be in Tuscaloosa from these dates to these dates. Let me know if you'd like me to bring the portfolio in person. Otherwise, send it in. Don't pester them. Please don't pester the gallery, because that'll be, talk about blacklisting. If you get a call every day, did you look at it yet? Did you look at it yet? And believe me, people do that. It's really awful. And every one of those, at that time when I first had the gallery, was self-addressed stamped, because we sent back slides and things. It went back without being looked at, went right in the envelope and back with a note that said, it's unnecessary to contact us every 5 seconds.
It's just like a job interview in that way, or, you send your resume off, and if you call them every day and ask them if they've reviewed your resume, that will be the quickest way to find your resume at the bottom of the stack. So treat it like a job. Treat it like you're applying for a job. Yeah.
You mentioned briefly, like, approaching gallery directors in person, just say, like, at an opening. Is it appropriate to talk with them at all as an artist? Not even about the topic, if you're talking about the show.
Yes, shake their hand and say, I really like this show, it's fantastic, and then walk away. Thank you. And if you find an assistant or something walking around and you say, are you accepting portfolios? That's okay too. But beyond that, don't take up their time. They're there to sell work. And when you're with that gallery, if you get in, that's what you want them doing for you.
Right. I think that's absolutely true of the opening. However, if you go on a, Tuesday afternoon to look at art and, someone in the gallery greets you and you develop a rapport, you're having conversation,
Absolutely.
It's okay to mention you're an artist. It's okay to, even if it's going really well, ask them if it's okay if you send them a link or something. That's fine, but never at an opening, because their focus is on another artist that night. And as Susan said, you would hope, as an artist represented by that gallery, that they would do the same courtesy for you when it was your opening.
Absolutely. You can put a CV in your submission. It's okay. We had a kind of a rule at Flat File of looking at the work first, partly because, first of all, there's a very blurred line between new, emerging, mid-career that a lot of people don't know. And truthfully, I don't even know the answer. If I could define that, I'd probably be a millionaire, because nobody knows what emerging really means. Everybody's got a different definition. So, there are people, we'd get portfolios from people who had one show and they said they were emerging artists because they think of it that way. I'm emerging into art. No one really knows. So personally, I would suggest not putting that anywhere in your statement or anywhere else. I am a what, because every gallerist and critic and people who know have a different definition of emerging. It's a tough word.
Could you talk a little bit more about the staff of a gallery and what their jobs are?
Sure,
Yeah, go
sure.
ahead.
So there's the front line. The person that will greet you at the desk is the receptionist or gallery assistant. That person is a great first line. That person is the gateway to anyone else at a higher level.
And it's a no-fault asking. It's a person
Right,
you
that,
don't...
that person will probably give you all kinds of answers.
Exactly, and you don't have to, you didn't make a black mark with the people above by
Right.
talking to that person that way.
And they're there to answer questions. That's their job. So that's the best person, if you need to say, I'd like to send a letter, who's the assistant director, that sort of thing. it's mostly based on size. So if it's a small gallery, they probably won't have assistant directors. They'll probably have a gallery owner or gallery director, and then, you know, that person is the next line. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of, you know, middle ground. But at the gallery where I worked, for example, we had, you know, we have a lot of different positions. There's registrars and art handlers and directors and gallery owners. So you want to go at the director level. That's the person you're shooting for via this receptionist or gallery assistant, right? The director is a decision maker at the very least. They're the person that's going to work directly with the artist. And if it's a larger gallery,
Go for the assistant director.
Yeah, go for the assistant director. Don't ask for the owner at the onset. That's, you know, that person has other people in line as gateways. So go through the appropriate channels.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you email a cover letter to like the assistant, could you email some JPEGs of your work?
Absolutely, as long as the email is openable. Don't send 20 attachments.
Yeah, you also,
Right, no, just 3 or
Right.
something.
but you also want to
But
make
you
sure
bump
that
into
it's
the Mac and
welcome.
PC thing, that's the problem.
Yeah, you can put it in a PDF. It's
Yeah.
another
Oh,
way,
okay,
as long as
yeah.
the PDF doesn't screw up the images, right?
Yeah, I can make a PDF, yeah. But
Yeah,
you can
that's-
send that along with the cover letter, you can do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But don't send that to the director directly.
No, the assistant, to the assistant.
And first inquire. It's really important to find out if they're even accepting things, because otherwise, again, you'll be blacklisted and nobody will ever look at your work.
When it comes to sending, PDF, would it be advisable, based on your guys' experience, of having a single PDF for your cover letter and then individual PDFs for each image? Or just put it all into one so it's a single click and then it's, let's say, 8 pages long?
If you're having someone look just at your letter that you're sending, I would say have it just be all one, let them scroll through it. If you're doing a CD, and I think I may have covered that on that handout, I can't remember. If you have a CD, it's good to have different folders. Each body of work gets its own folder with its title, and inside that folder will be the statement about that work and some images from that work. And then there's one folder in that CD for your CV and one for your major artist statement. And if you have a CV, you don't need a bio. Some people don't have a lot of shows and things under their belt, then a bio might be a little bit better, just briefly telling who you are and what you're doing, because, you know, if you say I showed only at the coffee shop and these 9 art fairs, I wouldn't put it as a CV.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
Absolutely. And in terms of CDs, you know, I haven't looked at CDs in probably 3 or 4 years. But if they are accepting CDs, and that's the route that you chose to go, make sure everything is well labeled. Again, all
Yes,
of these
exactly.
folders, the name of the series, the year you did them, and then each file should be named in a format, in a
And the
universal
CD,
format.
label the CD well. I have a horror story of the most wonderful work. I still have the CD. It had no name or contact info on it. And I have no idea who it was. I would have shown them. I would have sold the heck out of this artist, but I never knew who it was. And I keep it because I do a lot of these workshops, and I'm always wanting to say, please, please label everything carefully. The one thing about CVs as opposed to email submissions, for me, I travel a lot, so I could take 20 or 30 CDs with me and look at them on the airplane. And, you know, I had a lot of people who ended up with shows because I could take those on the airplane or on a trip. You can't get on, well, now you can start to get online on the plane, but, you know, it's very user-friendly to have CDs that way that you can take with you.
And flash drives.
And
Everybody's
flash
doing
drives, are
now.
great. You can actually have flash drives made with like your information on them now printed. They're wonderful. So yeah, flash drives are a good way. Something that's portable, whereas the web is not yet completely portable for like traveling on a plane and stuff, so. Other questions?
I'll hit you up again on
That's okay.
email stuff. So obviously the cover letter is going to be inside of a PDF. How?
In the body of your email.
Oh,
Your
you're gonna
body
use
of your
that in the
email is
body
the
of the
cover
email.
letter.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Is
No, that becomes, the
I
email
was gonna
becomes
say,
your
yeah.
cover letter.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Anything else you want to cover?
I think I've hit everything that I wanted to cover today.
Oh, I do have one more thing. If you're very, I mean, email is making this much easier, but there are still galleries, especially in smaller towns and cities, that, still want a physical portfolio, and usually would be a CD. Obviously, you don't care to have it back. When I first opened the gallery, we were still doing SASEs, people were sending slides. The world has changed so much that way, but if you're not sending by email and you're sending a packet, you can create a little postcard for yourself. If you're doing email, obviously they can just click reply and they'll tell you right away when they look at it. But it just has little like check boxes, and it says, yes, I like the work and I'd love to show you. Some of the artists that I'd get these from were actually kind of humorous and, quirky in their little postcards. Put a stamp on it, put it in your packet. It lets you know they got it. The checkbox could say, yes, I'd like to keep it for further review. No, I'm not interested, whatever, because we're no longer sending packets back usually. And so if we know, that way you don't worry, and you're like, okay, well, gallery number 14 in Chicago just said no. Let's go to gallery number 15. But they had it, they got it, whether they rejected it or not. I sat on a panel once at the Department of Cultural Affairs with 4 other gallerists, probably about 6-7 years ago, and I was the only person who returned everyone's packet or answered everyone, and I was so upset because I'm an artist also, and I thought it was so completely rude that people would just throw them in the garbage if they didn't like the work. So, but you can facilitate a lot of the help and the answering from the gallery by doing all the things right, so you don't piss them off and they don't throw it away.
One thing, sorry, just one second, I'll get back to you. But the easiest way to decrease your chances of rejection is making sure that it's a good fit and being introduced by someone else. So that goes back to networking. I mean, you want to be wanted by the gallery, right? It would be better if the gallery came to you. I always felt better about pursuing artists than being pursued. It's this, weird, awful negotiation that exists, but it is what it is. And so if you can get introduced via another artist or a collector or a curator, someone who can advocate for you, it's such a better foot to start out on. Someone who bought your work knows the gallerist and says, you've got to look at this. It's, I think this artist is really talented.
That's huge.
That's going to make the gallerist pay attention a lot quicker.
That's huge. And if a gallerist, who gets a packet, and I always used to do this, again, because I'm an artist, I think I thought like an artist. If somebody wasn't right for me, but I thought they were right for one of my colleagues, I would always send them over and say, with my blessing, I'd say, I think you need to look at this, because I think it really would be a good fit for you. And I think there really are gallerists who will do that. The other point, to add to this point of Erin's, is never lie about someone sending you to a gallery, because guess what? We get on the phone. I mean, I would get these all the time, photographers, and they'd say, oh, Rod Slemons from the Museum of Contemporary Photography told me to come to you. Rod? I never heard of that guy. So never lie to get yourself in the door. If it's legit and they'll make a call for you, as Erin said, or even if they say, yeah, use my name. You can put their name in the cover letter, but only do it if they really said it, because the network, especially in Chicago, is so small. We all know each other and we all talk. So really important.
So I'm going to just ask you to back up again. I just need some clarification on the PDF presentation. I understand the cover letter should be embedded in the email, but if you're showing examples of several series of work, do you put that all in like separate PDF files?
It's a personal preference. I prefer one document, one cohesive document. It's the modern day equivalent to a staple, It's an easy way to stay organized. Oh, this is another thing. Label your documents with your name. So don't just put the title of the work, put the artist's name, because you have to think about how it's going to be received on the other end. So if I get something, like Susan says, you travel a lot, you save it to your desktop so you can go back to look at it, and then you get on the plane and you open it, and who is this artist?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
if, if it's just a PDF of images, make sure that it's titled with your name.
So we're hearing that again and again. We're hearing it for the web because it benefits you. We're hearing it so we don't lose people like that poor artist wandering around that I don't know who it is. So yeah, just your name is good, you know, be proud of your name.
Yes?
Tony.
Thank you. I have a quick question for you. When you were talking about being introduced by someone else, I thought it was an excellent point. My question is, what if you follow those parameters? Okay, let's say, and this is not necessarily for a gallery, but let's say it's for someone in a public, they wanted public art for their facility. You sent them the cover letter, you sent the PDF, you were introduced by someone else, but now it's like that back and forth kind of, I'm calling, you know, maybe we're playing phone tag. How long do you do that? You know?
I guess your question pertains to like a project, like a public art commission of some sort. Like they've got a timeline, right?
Yeah.
So you're working back from the timeline. So let that dictate how much time you let go by. If it's a 2-year-long horizon, you know, don't call them the week after you send them a PDF.
Exactly.
If it's a 3-month horizon, go ahead and call, you know,
Yeah.
and just, it's just like with a job. I would say one follow-up, you know, and if you don't get a response, unfortunately, it's a bad sign. You know, it means they're not interested. But I think you can follow up once.
I agree.
Another question? Yeah.
So is the strategy to go for littler galleries, say Columbus or something initially? And I mean, Chicago seems kind of daunting to me, and LA seems like, I mean.
It's a comfortable way to do it. It's a way to do it without terrorizing yourself, you know, I think. And it gets you shows under your belt. It gets your CV pumped up with real stuff rather than the coffee shop. So, you know, being with galleries begets being with other galleries. Gallery will be much happier with you if you have gallery experience.
And you initially mentioned Columbus. That's a place.
Someone back
I
there
just
said
randomly
Columbus.
threw
I
out
just
Columbus
grabbed it.
as
So
an
like
arbitrary city.
Milwaukee, I mean.
Milwaukee has some good galleries.
I would
Santa
think
Fe
gallery-
has tons of galleries, and they're
Santa Fe.
very open-minded. There are, you know, the other thing to think about, and it depends on your work, of course, but people go on vacation, they buy art. And if you think about places that people go on vacation, cities in Colorado, cities in Florida, cities, you know, people are very relaxed on vacation. I sold enormous amount of work to tourists in the gallery who came to Chicago, you know, for the weekend or whatever. And toward the end of the gallery, before I closed, I was selling a lot of work to New Yorkers. And I asked them, why are you, you know, buying art in Chicago? And they said, because the prices are more, you know, sane, and the work is better. And I heard that repeatedly from New York collectors. It was amazing. So, you know, think about who may be buying there, not maybe who doesn't even live there, but who would be visiting a place.
Yes.
Since you just kind of mentioned pricing, are you going to talk about that at all? How do you, you know, if you really are just
Pricing
starting
your
to
work?
promote your work?
I don't think we can talk about pricing your work.
Yeah.
I think you need to, but that is a good way, and Erin said it before, it's a good way to understand if you fit well in a gallery, if you look at the pricing, if you can get the pricing on the work. You know, you can always be a little sneaky and call the gallery and say, you know, I'm interested in piece number XYZ, how much is it?
Yeah. Or go to the opening.
Or go to the
They
opening.
usually have
If
a
you're
price
in, if
list.
you're in your own city, look at the price list, see if you think you fit. See if, you know, well, I could do that, and then I should be priced at that, you know. But don't be crazy. I had kids from, you know, graduating from the Art Institute, especially kids from abroad and from Asia who would, you know, I'd say, okay, I want to show your work in a group show, and they'd say, okay, and they'd bring it in, it'd be like $10,000 for a small painting, and be like, wait a minute, you know, what? Michiko Itatani's paintings, your professor, you know, paintings are $21,000 for something, you know, 5 times that size. So be realistic about what you can charge for your work. Art price, if you couldn't go on art price, you can get a sense of, you know, of pricing for art. most of those artists are more well-known than probably most of the artists in this room, but it's a good departure point to understand the market.
And the galleries should be the ones pricing your art.
Right.
You know, they're the ones best suited to understand their collector base and understand how you fit into the scheme. If you have a sales history, great. You know, if you've sold work out of your studio,
Right.
and you can prove that you've sold work between this, you know, between a range, that's fantastic. But that's often not the case for a lot of, you know, emerging artists.
Exactly. If you're selling only on your website, then you are the one who has to determine price. But truthfully, I think you'd rather sell more work at a lower price and then raise it than start out so high that you never sell anything.
Yes.
Is it like something that a gallerist would think about? I've read several books, and was this book written by Bill Carroll and the New School? You gave the chapter of the book.
Oh, the book that you talked about? Oh, okay.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I was just curious. Some of that literature refers to having shows for or selling to collectors or like that aren't collectors, I guess. Is that something you're thinking about to say, okay, this person has sold to a lot of relatives? Okay, are you going to think like, okay, there's a bunch of work floating around, you know,
Well, you pretty much know that unless it's a recognized collection. You pretty much know that it's anybody they sold to, and, you know, it's, if you have a collector who really is a collector, be sure that's on your CV. But if it's just your relatives, you know, I don't know that I'd put it in there.
Yeah.
Would all this information that you just presented pertain also to approaching other galleries in other countries, designers, corporations? Would this be the same way of approaching these different venues?
Well,
I think I'll answer the question about other countries, and you can talk about corporations
Okay.
since you've worked with
Yeah, that's what I
corporations
do.
so closely. I would be very weary about working with galleries in other countries until you have representation in the United States. Because if you have a gallerist here, they will facilitate your relationship with the other gallery. They'll
Right.
often have contacts in that city, so you can find out if the gallery is a reputable one, and what other artists they work with, that sort of thing. I would be very weary of signing on with a gallery in a country you can't access easily,
Yeah, if
that you
you've
haven't been
never
able to
been there.
visit. You
agree.
might send them some work and never see it again. So, you know, I know that it's probably tempting to take opportunities when they come along, but I would really be wary of that until you have representation in the U.S.
I have a gallery in India, a gallerist in India who's actually arranging a touring show of my work, which will be about 2 years long. And, you know, he's my key, even though he's there, but I've been there. I've met with him numerous times. And so every gallery that will be on that tour is basically responsible to him. You know, he's facilitating that. He's checked them out. They're people he knows in all the different cities. So, yeah, you need an advocate like that if you're going to do something overseas.
And then the corporate.
Oh, and the corporate thing, generally you don't approach corporations, a consultant does. That's what I do, one of the things that I do. And that's a really good way to find your stuff in the wastebasket fast, is to approach the corporation directly. Generally, there's either a consultant, a designer, if they're doing a remodel or something, there will be somebody that is your intermediary. The one thing that you can do is the same way you're approaching galleries, you can approach art consultants with packets like that. Check to make sure that they'll look at them so you know that they have looked at it once you did. But you can, you know, they're a little bit hard to find around the city because a lot of them are not real high key. But I think more and more art consultants are getting websites now. I know I have one for that part of my life. And you know, you can send art to them. I mean, I've found artists because they approached me that I've shown in public spaces and bought for corporate collections, yeah.
This is a question about websites. So I'm assuming that the art is the first thing that you guys look at.
I
Absolutely.
always did look at the art first.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So if there's, and I've read some, and I've come across other things that say you should have a CV that, you know, you click on it and it comes up as a PDF or whatever. If for some reason you don't want to do that, let's say there's some major gaps in your, you know, resume or whatever, so you're not really comfortable just posting it, is it okay to write just CV available upon request?
Yes.
Okay.
You
There's
can.
nothing weird about
You can,
that.
and then in that case, I would put at least a brief bio, because we do want to know something about you. You know,
Right.
you're not supposed to be the woman of mystery. So, but there should be something. What do you, I'm just curious, what are you referring to as gaps in your CV?
Well, there's just years where I didn't show at all. So,
Yeah, but people
That's-
understand that. I
That's
mean,
the case for a lot of
people have
artists.
children, they do this, they do that, they have to get a job for a few years. I think that's very common, and I wouldn't worry about it at all. I think that gallerists know that.
Mhm. And I think it's better to have some information for them
Absolutely.
than none.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there are a lot of really
If
established.
they had enough interest to, you know what I mean?
Well, then they'll talk to you, and then you'll have a conversation, and you'll know all of that. And then you can say that in the conversation. You know, I stopped making art for 5 years when my son was young, but, you know, like that. And I think that, you know, we're all humans, and we're not evil, the evil wicked witch of the West, all the gallerists. Some of them are, but not all of them. Any other questions? Yeah.
Might be an odd question, just maybe a mistake that you might have made early on that.
Like
something-
prison?
Yeah. Hey, well, I don't know.
I learned to paint while I was in Statesville.
Or maybe a memorable moment that kind of helped you or really shaped your practice.
Artist statement, but not long, just one sentence. You know, when my father died, I felt compelled to make work about loss.
Yeah.
That's what that sentence is. That's what that is. You had a question.
Yeah, with three-dimensional work, how many secondary and detailed views are too many?
I think one is enough in general, but if it's really, really three-dimensional and it really looks different, I guess you could do a few.
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to.
Yeah, I wouldn't spend too much time on a single work. 'Cause
Yeah,
again,
I
they're
agree.
looking at you as an artist, your whole body of work. So.
Yeah, I agree.
I think part of what he was asking too was for each of you individually, was there something that you did earlier in your career that you wish you hadn't? A mistake that you made, something you did that was
Oh, is that
was
what
a
you were
learning
asking?
moment for you?
Oh, the aha moment. Okay.
You send 6, resumes and portfolios to 6 different galleries all at once, something like that. If there was something that made you realize, oh, I'm not supposed to do that, I should learn from this.
Were you at Sing Sing?
Well,
No, but Rikers Island, no.
As an artist, I'm not a
You're not an
practicing
artist.
artist.
So. But as a gallerist, was there something ever you think, or?
Sure, I acted too hastily once and ended up sending out an announcement for an artist opening to about 3,000 people, and the names were all wrong. So it was Aaron Arinko and Susan Fowler. It was just the way the Excel spreadsheet split.
Oh, wow.
I was an important artist who has a big show coming up in Chicago at one of the major museums.
Ouch.
And every collector in our database got their name wrong on their invitation.
Oops.
So you better believe that I dotted every I and crossed every T after that. Never let anything go out the door without reading it backwards. So that's,
I get
incidentally,
that.
that's a really good editing trick. Read things backwards. If you're,
That's a great idea.
if you really need something to be perfect, read it, from right to left. Did you
Cool.
make any big mistakes as an artist?
Well, I think I made a really big mistake when I opened the gallery, because I was like working, not that I opened it, but I was working on a business plan, and I bought this like workbook, and I was being really good, and I got to probably like page 10, and then I found a space. And, I really, really did go into it sight unseen, and I really thank Chicago Art Dealers Association. They took me in very quickly into their ranks. I was really very gratified and proud that I was approached so quickly, but that really helped me. But I was really just kind of treading water for a while, just doing it my way because I didn't really know how to do it. So for me as a gallerist, I was just kind of, winging it for a long time. And I would say that, if anybody ever did decide to open a gallery, if any of you ever decide to get together with some of your friends and open a co-op gallery, for example, again, do your homework. I just found a space that I liked and went for it, but I wouldn't recommend that to anyone.
Is approaching museums basically the same way?
No, you don't approach museums. Your gallerist will approach museums for you, or a consultant, or a curator. People don't approach museums. Remember something. The best voice for you is usually not your own. Someone else who can facilitate you meeting someone, a gallerist, a museum curator, is always better, because it's the same thing as writing, it's hard to sell your own work. It's hard to do your own thing, whereas people who you give a percentage of your life to do, this for you, are way better. For anything, for public art projects, for anything, if you can find an advocate, if you can find a mentor who will, sing your praises to the right people, you're so far ahead of the game, because everybody's always approaching dealers and curators and gallerists, and it's just, it's something better done by a professional. No, designers you could go to on your own. In fact, a designer could be an advocate for you just like a curator could be, or a gallerist could be.
The chapter from the book, it's Starting Your Career as an Artist, a guide for painters, sculptors, photographers, and other visual artists.